Fish out the dirt here. And then I had like 5 gummy bears when I came home. Und? Sind wir gut drauf?
Ja.
Das Audio. Oh. Das Audio ist auch gut?
Die Mikrofone in der Kamera sind ziemlich gut.
Okay. Dann würde ich sagen, let me look at my watch here. 1 minute. Do what? You're in the first for the peanut gallery there. What was that?
Does it say go, you just start?
No.
Gallery.
We'll stop at 3 o'clock. Start at 3 o'clock.
The peanut gallery was Howdy Doody.
Yeah. It is exactly 3 o'clock. We'll start.
Buffalo Bob. Did you know that Milton Hill designed Howdy Doody?
No, I did not know that.
Believe it or not, the animator, the Disney animator. He designed the puppet. Oh, whatever that means.
Okay, kleine Begrüßung auf Deutsch. Ich freue mich, euch alle hier zu sehen zum Künstlergespräch mit GregHildebrandt, dem bekannten amerikanischen Maler. Die meisten von euch werden wahrscheinlich wissen, um wen es hier geht, da ihr alle da seid. Wir werden etwa eine halbe Stunde eine Retrospektive seiner Karriere ziehen, ein bisschen mit Vergangenheit plaudern und über seine momentanen Arbeiten. Danach werden wir für eine halbe Stunde, wenn es genug Fragen gibt, ein Q&A machen, also Question and Answers. Da könnt ihr so ziemlich alles fragen, außer super persönlichen Sachen, die ihr dann noch nicht beantworten werdet. Aber vor allem, wenn ihr irgendwelche Fragen zu bestimmten Arbeiten habt oder Technikfragen oder und so weiter und so fort, dann wird er sicher gerne dazu Stellung nehmen. Das ganze Künstlergespräch wird aus Gründen seiner Einsprachigkeit auf Englisch geführt. Ich habe euch ja vorher gefragt, die meisten verstehen wahrscheinlich Englisch, wir versuchen langsam zu sprechen. Übersetzung macht eigentlich keinen Sinn, sonst verlieren wir zu viel Zeit. Ich werde jetzt mal anfangen, vielleicht mich selbst noch vorzustellen. Mein Name ist David Boller, ich bin vom Verlag Virtual Graphics. Wir publizieren jetzt eines der 2 neuen Bücher hier auf dem München Festival mit ihm. Das ist ein Buch, Vamps, Tramps and Beauties heißt das, und das sind seine ersten Pin-Up-Arbeiten, die jetzt als Buch verlegt werden. Es gibt ja von Panini auch noch eine Neuauflage des Tolkien-Buchs. Nur so ganz nebenbei, ich zeichne auch selbst. Ich habe auch eigene Sachen im Verlag draußen und ich bin auch mit seiner Tochter verheiratet. Das heißt, ich kenne die Familie auf intimste Art und Weise und kenne natürlich auch die Hintergründe, deswegen frage ich ihn die gewissen Sachen, weil ich kenne natürlich die Antworten schon. Das macht es ein bisschen einfacher, das zu fragen. Okay, very well. Let's start.
First I want to thank
Okay.
you know what Panini and all the people that have invented this convention, and David
In virtual graphics.
and Virtual Graphics for bringing me here.
Yeah, I want to say too that this is his first time in Germany and in Europe, all in all. So he's really excited about seeing all the buildings and meeting the people and just getting in the flair. Unfortunately, as you very well know, we've been sort of reined in since we arrived here. You know, literally the first day they landed, it started to rain. It's basically been raining ever since. And unfortunately, he's probably not getting the very best impression of Munich and of Europe that he could, you know, considering these kind of almost biblical downpours we've been experiencing in the last few days. Okay, but enough time wasted with my babbling here. Let's start with your career. Greg, just quickly introduce yourself. When were you born and where were you born?
GregHildebrandt, born Detroit, Michigan, 1939. Twin brother Tim. I was 5 minutes older, and yeah. But I was drawing and painting along with Tim. Making puppets and costumes, and since I was 3 years old, probably, and never stopped. And just were driven and obsessed, and primarily by the comics at first, comic strips, you know, Hal Foster, Prince Valiant, Tarzan, and Flash Gordon and all. Can you understand me? I mean, is this... And so we used to copy all the strips all the time, and then we started buying comic books, you know, you could buy them a dime, right? You know, we go out and cut some grass somewhere and go run to the store and buy our latest issue of comic books, all the way up till EC, which we used to go to the comic book store on the corner home from school and get all of our Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror and everything, and all of a sudden we went by and like one day they weren't there. And it's like, you know, the comic code thing that had squashed all that stuff.
So that would be about mid-50s then?
Yeah, early 50s. Early 50s. That no more, all that was gone. And so, but we continued to look at all the other comics and draw them, and then we're obsessed with animation. And Animated built our own animation drawing boards and got an 8mm movie camera and photographed our animation, and then got obsessed with special effects, and we would build miniature sets. Our parents, we moved from Detroit, they moved from Detroit to Rochester, Michigan, which was like more country and had 3 acres and a barn in their garage, which Tim and I completely took over. Built a planet set in one of the buildings, and then a city scene in another after we saw George Pal's War of the Worlds in 1952. And it made tripod machines and blew up the city, you know, with powdered magnesium and our own homemade gunpowder and all kinds of stuff. And then we were in high school, and then we decided, well, the draft was on, so, you know, everybody had to serve. So the reserves had just started, so we enlisted in the Army and did a 6-month active duty stint and got out of that. And we've been writing letters to Disney for years about what we had to do to become animators, and they said, find a school that focuses on perspective anatomy and life drawing. We found one in Detroit because abstract expressionism was taken hold completely. So we found this old line school called Meinzinger's. Meinzinger's art school was like this little walk-up place with all these professorial type guys with pinstripe suits and little bow ties that taught you the mechanics, which is what it was about. So we took that course for 6 months and then got a job. Our father worked for GM, General Motors, and in the city he had a lot of contacts, and one of the big contacts was the Jam Handy organization. The Jameson Handy was a film producer, an industrial film producer, the biggest in the world probably at one point, and then in the country at our time when we were there. And they had an animation department, a live action department, and a film strip division. So we started in the animation department at 18 years old, opaquing cells for about 9 months. It was a training film for the U.S. Air Force. They did training films for the U.S. Navy, Air Force. They did films for U.S. Steel and General Motors and Ford and Campbell Soup. So we did storyboards, designed films, did finished paintings for backgrounds, and then finally towards the end we started to animate. And then we left there and came to New York City to make documentary films for about 6 years for, probably nobody remembers the name of Bishop Fulton J. Sheen.
So for the church, in other words?
Yeah, for the Catholic Church.
Okay.
But this bishop was obsessed with bringing Americans, particularly American teenagers, to an awareness of the third world. And that was like his passion, to bring this awareness for what ends. He was the kind of a guy that wanted to transform the world. He really believed that, you know, you could make a difference and make an economic shift and things. And so our job was to make films that would just kind of like make people aware. So we went to South America, filmed, all the bishop said was, Tim, Greg, go to South America and film poverty. Well, you know, so that's how we landed, and I was like 23 years old. I was a very naive kid from Detroit, Michigan, and man, I mean, my eyeballs were peeled, as Gully Jimson said in The Horse's Mouth. You ever saw that movie with Alec Guinness? But, you know, and it's like, so we came back and we started editing these films and did that for about 6 years. And then it was a big transformation for us, you know, intellectually, politically, religiously, sociologically, whatever. And then we left that and started illustrating, just in general illustration.
Okay, but you had, I don't know if you mentioned this is clear, he moved from Detroit to New York to work for the church and basically stayed because we met too when I was at school in New Jersey, so the family had lived in New Jersey for quite a while at the time.
Yeah, from 1964.
Right.
And then I just, with my brother, started general illustration around, you know, everything we could do, just advertising art, editorial art, children's books, educational books,
You did a lot of Disney style type of children's book.
Yeah, well, a lot of stuff are Golden Books, Western Publishing, and then several bunch of Disney books through Random House, Cinderella, Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, a whole bunch of stuff. And when we worked for the bishop, a girl there saw some drawings of ours of like gnomes and dwarfs and stuff that we were just kind of like fussing around with, and she said, "Oh, you'd love The Hobbit," and we said, "Well, what's that?" She said, "Oh," so she brought the book in, and this was like 1967, I think, and so we read The Hobbit, and then, oh my God, we got to illustrate this at some point. Then we became aware that, well, there's The Lord of the Rings. We read the whole thing, and then it was like, well, we're going to illustrate this someday, and it was like just kind of like always in the background all through these 60s, and finally in 1975, a calendar of Valentine Books in America had the rights to do The Lord of the Rings. And they had a calendar by an artist named Tim Kirk. And on the back of it, there was a little notice that said, Valentine Books is looking for artists who want to interpret The Lord of the Rings. So, bam. So we called Valentine, got a hold of the art director, Ian Summers, great guy, fantastic guy. And he said, yeah, come on over. In those days, you could call, the people would see you anywhere.
Yeah, you would go with your portfolio, basically. It's not like today where you send stuff over the internet. You have to use your big portfolio, and you would drop that off at the publishers. They'll look at it, and if they liked it, you will get work. If not, you get your portfolio back and you go to the next one.
Yeah, I mean, you literally, well, for most of the time, at this time, this would be like mid-70s, the art directors would just come on in. You would just down immediately. And it was very personal. It was very close. It wasn't like some distant thing. And well, Ian Summers loved the portfolio. We had a whole mixed bag of stuff, of all different things. And then some specific drawings only that we had done from The Lord of the Rings, the Gandalf, the Hobbits. And
so you did some sample art?
Yeah. Just a bunch of sketches. They were like drawings. And then, well, Ian approved it, and then now the editor, the science fiction fantasy editor, had approved it. Judy Lynn Del Rey, who was the wife of Lester Del Rey, one of the great sci-fi writers, a friend of Isaac Asimov, and Ian called Judy's office, and she came in, and she's a dwarf. She was like
a hobbit.
Yeah, basically, 3 feet tall and a brilliant lady. She bought the rights for Star Wars. She went. Everybody was going to California to look. They were selling the rights way back, when the film wasn't even finished yet. What she looked at, and everybody looked at, was a rough cut. That is to say, all the X-wing fighter fights were all World War II cut-ins, you know what I mean? It's just cut-ins, and there was no soundtrack or anything yet. And everybody turned it down. All the publishers turned it down except Judy. She bought the rights for what, $50,000? $25,000. All rights to publishing for Star Wars, which was really crazy. But anyway, she looked at the sketches and said she liked them, and then now Lester Del Rey had to come in and give his approval. He was like the old wise man. Lester was like this old wizard kind of a guy. And he didn't have an office there, but he had to come in. And, so they set up another appointment, and then Lester gave his approval, and then they gave us Farmer Giles, Smith of Wooten Major, and Farmer Giles of Ham, which is a Tolkien children's book, the cover to do, which consisted of a little cartoon knight and a dragon. They approved that, and they said, okay, go ahead. So they gave us the first calendar, which, and we said, well, you got 6 months to do it. So there was like 13 paintings we had to do in 6 months. So we're scrambling, and how the hell like you approach anything, it's like, Jesus, you got all this material, what the hell do you do? You start thinking, well, good guys, bad guys, long shot, medium shot, exterior, interior, those became, warm light, cool light, moonlight, firelight, those become our kind of guides for, just to try to make some kind of a breakdown of how you chose the pictures. And of course, the principal characters. So we did those sketches, all the layouts, and at that point we were just, Tim and I were mainly posing each other, just, put this bathrobe on, and when we shoot some Polaroid shots, because we were from photographs, but there was no costumes yet, that gradually those came to be, we started to make those. And we did all the sketches, they approved them, we did the paintings, those went out to the publisher, and then got into the stores, and whoosh, the calendar went through the ceiling, through the roof, and then we started getting fan mail. It was the first time Tim and I ever got fan mail. This was like, we were, what the hell, this was like 1967. I was born in 76.
Yeah.
I was born in 39, so I wasn't like not a kid, I've had a long career. Now we're getting fan mail, and it's like, you kind of like, whoa, this is crazy.
One of the things that might interest people is like, what was the working environment at the time? I mean, how did Tim and you work? Did he work at home alone? Did you work at home alone? Did you guys work together? I mean, how did that work?
Yeah, well, both ways. He would do sketch ideas, I would do sketch ideas. We meet, we talk, we did all the breakdowns, say the selection of the scenes that we wanted to illustrate. We made that decision by reading the books and marking off 500 possibilities in the books, and then we get together and talk about it and bang that out relatively quickly. And then he'd do some sketches on his own, I'd do some sketches on his own. Whatever one we both then determined, that's the one, that's the angle. There would be different angles and different setups. And then we both land on that, and then we'd shoot photographs, and then one of us would start the painting. In those years, painting on gessoed masonite. So we gesso a bunch of masonite panels. And gesso was a white ground. You just painted all solid white, so you're painting on a white surface, and then transfer the layout to the masonite. One of us would do that, or the other, one or the other, and then one of us would start the painting. And we generally have two or three paintings going at one time. Tim would be working on one, I'd be working on one. And then when they got large, as the years went by, like by the second year, the paintings kept getting bigger, because the paintings were smaller in the first year just to get them done, because we had 6 months and we had a whole year the next time. And I kept kind of like pushing. I was a crazy maniac on the deal about pushing bigger and bigger and bigger, because I wanted to actually get into galleries, New York galleries, and so I had some kind of like mixed idea about this was going to be gallery art also somehow, some way, rather than just only printed. So the paintings were getting 6 feet wide, and Tim was saying, "What are you, crazy? I mean, we're never going to get this done," and we're kind of like bonging each other over the head about it. But then we'd sit down and paint on the same painting together. So we'd have a palette, we'd mix our palettes, we'd determine all of our colors together. What's the color of the light source was the key issue for us. The blue moon and the firelight, we determine exactly what the chroma level would be, that's to say the intensity of the color. And what, and then we mix them all up with each other, big piles of paints. And then put those, it gradually got the idea to put those in Tupperware containers, so you'd seal this, because it's acrylic we work with, and it dries very fast. And we had plant misters, you'd spray it to keep it, hose it down to keep it wet and working, and I still work that way. And so we could mix these colors up, and either Tim would take the painting at his house and work on it out of this Tupperware container, or I could stay home and paint on it. But I'd say 80% of the times we were together painting. 20%.
So did you have a studio, or?
Yeah, big studio. At this time, I had a studio in like I say, in Jersey, in West Orange. I had a carriage house I lived in a Queen Anne Victorian house, and had a huge carriage house out back, which I transformed into a studio. So, and Tim had an attic. He painted in an attic in his home, and I always felt claustrophobic. So I said, Tim, you got to come over here and paint. God damn it, I can't paint there. It's too. So I'd say 80% of the time, Tim was at my studio painting.
Did he have the house in Gladstone already at that time?
Yeah, he had a house in Gladstone, which was a beautiful Victorian house. Yeah, and in any event, we did these 3 calendars, and that gave us, and they kept selling more and more. I forgot what the hell, in the millions. It was like really insane. They were outselling these, whatever the biggest selling calendars were in the day. And then we decided that the 4th contract came in from Ballantine Books to do the 4th calendar, and we said, like, let's do our own story. So we illustrated a book called Ursharak, which we spent 3 years doing and trying to forward it as a motion picture to the William Morris Agency. And it got crazier and crazier, because I was like really a fish out of water. I mean, you're constant. What's that? The what? Oh, yeah. No, we started working on our book, and the way we wrote it was in the form of storyboards. So we were writing our story. We had about 1,000 storyboards that we pinned. And the thing was this, and it was a basic backtracking a little bit. After we finished the 3rd Tolkien calendar, we said this should be a movie, a live action film. I never saw it as animation, I saw it as live action. So we started to shoot all of our stuff to do a slide presentation, and then brought it up to Ian Summers, the art director at Valentine Books, and he said, oh, yeah. So let's check it out. So he checked it out and found out that Ralph Bakshi had just optioned it. And so I put the kibosh on that, And so we said, well, what the hell? I said, what the hell? I think I was the first one. I said, well, what the hell? Let's do our own story then. It kind of like came out of that. Well, we can't make the Lord of the Rings. We can't get forward the Lord of the Rings. Let's do our own story. And with the basic concept that it would be stripped down from the Lord of the Rings. We weren't going to do we weren't going to spend 20 years on this or 40 years on this. And we spent 3 years on it actually, but so we started this thing, like I say, in terms of storyboard writing and designing all these characters. So, and they had all the stereotypes, so we just went for the standard, the quest, the journey from here to there, and all this crap you go through, and you got to go do this thing at the end of it,
But I mean, you weren't writers basically by craft, so you had some help there, didn't you?
Yeah, I have a friend from Detroit, Jerry Nichols, an old buddy of mine that always was writing it and had nothing published. He'd been writing forever and in all kinds of stories. And I insisted that Jerry be the guy that's going to write this book. And the publishers didn't want anything to do with it. They kept saying, no. Once it was pitched to various publishers, they knew, get a professional. We want, L. Sprague de Camp, all these old magic guys, old fantasy writers from that's what they were insisting on. I said, I don't want that. I mean, I want my buddy. Because I knew that if I worked with a writer who had been established for a long time, it would become his thing, So in any event, we're writing this out, and then we're sculpting out these key characters, like Eowyn, our elf prince, was the blonde-haired, all in white, robed, hero figure, the elf. And then there was Torgon, the Death Lord of Golgarath, which was this ancestor elf who was about 7 feet tall, encased in black armor. You couldn't see his face. He had horns and giant mace and mail and a long cloak and robe, and they were going to battle each other, and all that. Eowyn had to get the magic crown, helm, and sword, and they were going to face off. Only those two could face off to, put it into the eve, blah, blah, blah. Then we said, well, all these, we didn't want make it just a Nordic myth, so we started mixing races. We had this strong opinion about women, so we create Azira, the Amazon princess, and then we have Gwyn, who is Eowyn's lover, who is a strong a fighter, and then we have Ali Ben Kara. It's like the desert nation, and the two wizards, Elgan and Shandar. We're old buddies for the last, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff, and the Wookiees, who are these big hairy guys who are about 7 feet tall. I basically patterned them after Sasquatch. So then we get a call, the phone rings in the studio. Oh, you guys gotta help us out. This is John and Murray, the advertising agency. You came through once before for us with a poster for Young Frankenstein. You guys painted it overnight. They didn't use it, but we literally painted a picture overnight for Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein. They remembered that. And they said, okay, and then we, in the meantime, since we saw them years before, we're famous for The Lord of the Rings, so they put that together and they called us, we have a film here, it's a science fiction film, and the director doesn't like the poster he's got, so we need help because we need this damn thing. The movie's coming out in a week. And so we said, okay, we ran into the city, and they showed us all these 8x, glossies, and I'm looking at all this stuff. I said, what the hell is this? Well, Star Wars. They didn't know. These guys never saw the movie. They didn't know what it was. And I didn't know. But, my main thing, everybody asks me, I'm like, who's the blonde kid with the white robes and who the hell is the hairy guy? Holy shit, that's my character back where I'm going, wait a minute. Then they show the Darth Vader. I said, oh my God, this is impossible. So now, my Torgon was, only more medievalized, my character. And it was all these stereotypes were exactly the same. And so I was like hitting the gut and like trying to figure this out because the film hadn't come out yet. We took the job, we worked it out with these guys. We went home, we painted the picture in 36 hours. Tim worked on it for a while, went to sleep, and I worked on it, Tim went to sleep, and then we both got together. And I never thought, I said, oh, well, what the hell, it may pass, it's going to go away, so I don't have to worry about any of that, Torgon stuff or anything like that, you know what I mean? Or this white kid, it was a white robe kid, the movie hit, well, like, insane. But all the steam went out of my story for me. Now I'm still forward to saying the William Morris Agency has it. We've been pitching it to half a dozen publishers. The publishers want it. They're all in a bidding war for this thing because it's kind of like caught up in this mad wave of Star Wars, and we're sucked into that. The people were laying money down like crazy for this book only because it's mainly connected to Star Wars and our past Lord of the Rings connection. And so where the publishers are battling with each other, and we got this huge chunk of money for two guys that never wrote a book in their life. And we now William Morris Agency is onto it. Oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. You know, they're taking it to Hollywood. They got a whole bunch of the various producers are coming in and getting involved in this. It's Hugh, you're my principal character. Our principal character was a masculine, male, dominant figure, you know, kind of guy, Hugh Oxen. And so one guy he had already talked to Sean Connery. Sean Connery was going to play the role, who would have been perfect at that time. And it's all going. Finally, that he passes on because. Ultimately, what it came down to is everybody was saying, well, Conan's underway. They're producing Conan. Nobody's done a major fantasy film yet. Because everything is hard, you know, Star Wars. Everybody's screaming for Star Wars. Give me rockets and droids and shit, you know. And so nobody's talking about old magic anymore. Well, let's see what Conan does. So by the time Conan came out, I had run out of money. I mean, and that's the only way. And I wasn't too smart in those days. I mean, you know, it wasn't like, now it's like, well, you never try to forward a project with your own money, it's OPM, you know, it's other people's money.
Or the 3 Fs, friends, family, and fools.
Yeah, there you go. So I ran out of money and it just stopped. I mean, I suppose, we had tons of people involved. John Dykstra, who had done the Star Wars, he was the original ILM guy. And he was doing Battlestar Galactica on television back then. He got attached to the project, he badly wanted to do it. And we had a screenplay writer and everything was all set. Then the William Morris Agency just, at the key meeting that kind of put the end to the whole thing was, I don't know if you remember the name, Joseph E. Levine. He was a huge film producer that brought in the Steve Reeves Hercules movies back in the 50s. He bought them up, he did a translation in America, released them like at 800 theaters, so made $1 trillion. And then he started producing great films like The Graduate and all kinds of very quality films. He was kind of like the man, and then he hit A Bridge Too Far was a film that he and Gabe Katzka, his partner, had just produced, which was like the Second World War film that was all like live bombers and thousands of people on this thing. And there were the guys for the big movie, let's see, you saw. So William Morris, they set this screening up, and by this point I had put all my money into making my Urshrak into a film, a mini film almost, to tell the story. I hired a narrator who got music and did like a whole pitch that way. So the day's coming now, we're at the William Morris Agency in New York City in their projection room, loaded with all these people, producers, and Mr. Levine's coming. So he finally arrives in like the Jewish Godfather kind of like thing. Everybody's like bowing down. And he's kind of staring at me, and I was like a fish out of water by this point. My nerves were frazzled. I was kind of like going. I had not been in my studio for, I don't know, a year. I was just out trying to get a movie done, and I was kind of crazy. And in any event, he said, "Let me see what you got." So the lights all go out, turn the thing on, and he watches it. He gets it done. He applauds it very warmly. He says, turns to me, and he says, "If you want to get," and that was in 1977. He said, if you want to get that on the screen, which I just looked at, it's going to cost $145 million. Now back then, Star Wars cost $10 million. So he said $145 million. It was like, and that basically sank the whole.
Outlandish at the time.
Yeah, it was impossible. So that kind of sank the whole thing. And it came to an end. And so then I went on to, then with my friend Joe Scrocco, who was forwarding this with me in Hollywood. He and his sister wanted to get together and work together. They started a publishing company, Unicorn Publishing, and I started illustrating. Jean's right here, and she and Joe published what we illustrated. Classics. Well, public domain classics. Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan. Gene and I would just say, "Oh, let's do what? Well, let's go. What can we do? Yeah, Alice in Wonderland. Oh, yeah, Robin Hood. Oh, Dracula." So, and we just had a ball doing that stuff for 14 books. And then what the hell came out? Oh,
well, basically, exactly what I want to talk about the next thing that most people here might know about are your Marvel cards. You know, in the early 90s, in the United States, especially Marvel Comics, there was a big revival. Comics were all of a sudden popular. You had Image Comics, they were selling millions of copies. And trading cards, you know, growing basically out of the baseball card, you know, thing in the United States, it's mostly like an American thing, became really, really big. And Marvel had started a series called Marvel Masterworks. And the first series of Marvel Masterworks was done by a guy named Joe Chusco. One of the other might know him. He was also like a pulp, he had like a nice like Marvel superhero pulp style, and he was doing about 100 plus cards, and that did tremendously well for them. So they were thinking, how well, who could we get next?
Right. Well,
Masterpieces.
Masterpieces.
so I said to Gene, I've been getting up in drawing every morning. Comics always came. I got to do something in the comics. I haven't been there. You know, I haven't drawn comics since I was a kid. So I'm getting up in the morning and drawing superheroes like I was 12 years old again. I mean, literally after all of this stuff. And I said to Jean one day, I want to do some comics. She said, what? I said, I don't know. Well, let's. And so she went, like she always does, goes to the top and calls Stan Lee. And she called Stan, and Stan said, wasn't over in New York anymore, he was in Hollywood. But he set it up the meeting in Marvel for us, and we went over there. And so they kind of like said, well, what do you want to do? And I don't know, what do you want? Anything you want. They kind of like rolled out this red carpet, like almost like. And so then we got the Marvel Masterpieces set, which was like 158 paintings in 6 months, 7 months, 8 months?
Yeah, it was long.
In 6 months. 2 minutes ago, bam! It's like, it was always this thing with us, it was like, if the gun goes off, all right, you know, kind of a mentality, which is kind of exciting. It's impossible. The bigger, it always seemed to me that, you know, many times in the past, the more impossible it was, the more thrilling it was, because, you know, you didn't know whether you're going to be able to pull this off. You know, because if it's like, this is a piece of cake, it gets boring, you know. So, and then, right when we started that, then Gene, we're in the studio, we were all sharing a studio now at Unicorn Publishing, Tim, myself, and Mary was in it, and then finally David too. And, but Gene opens the door one day and says, guess what you're doing next? I said, what? She says, Terry and the Pirates, the resurrection of the Milt Kniff comic strip from the 1930s and 40s, which I was a huge fan of when I was a kid. She says, you're doing that daily and Sunday with Michael Uslan. Michael's our friend, he's the producer of the Batman movies. He optioned Terry and the Pirates from Tribune Media. And Gene, without talking to me, had said yes to Michael, we'll do the comic strip. And I freaked out. I said, yeah, I'm like, Jesus Christ. It's like walking in one of the God's footsteps. I don't do ink. I mean, I'm not an ink guy. I'm paint. And she said, shut up. She closed the door and let Tim and me freak out. So we freaked out. And I ran over to Joe Kubert's school, and I'm talking to Joe. Joe, you know, because Joe has been, you know, one of the masters in talking about God, everything from Hawkman through, you know, the Thor, everything. And so he's giving me clues on what to use, how to ink. It was like a kid starting all over.
You hadn't actually done comics at this point. I mean,
no, never.
Really. There's a couple minor things, but
yeah, minor. I wasn't doing any sequential art at all, and so first there's this it's terror, which gets transformed into excitement, and I don't know exactly how the hell that happens, but generally that's right. That's the way it works. You're terrorful. Then it's like, whoa, this is a thrill. This is exciting, you know, and we pulled it off. I mean, we did it for a year.
Just for the record, what that actually entailed was that he had to do a daily comic, a daily strip, and a Sunday page.
Realistic.
Well, yeah.
Not little, you know, not just right. Like, you know, right?
Right. I mean, you took this really literal. I mean, you would post figures.
Yeah, we posed everything. Took photographs. Cast it. David was. So both Tim and I.
That shows how desperate they got, because I started inking some of them.
Well, no. At the end of it, you know, I'm inking, and Tim and I both do it, and it gets to the end, and Gene's saying, "Well, this is impossible because there's no money in it." You see, by this time, the storytelling, at least in America, the storytelling strip was dead. I mean, there was like what, 2 or 3 of them?
That was one of the problems that you have to remember. That was like mid-90s, where most newspapers were already totally broke. almost as broke as they are today. And it was much cheaper for a newspaper to basically buy the syndication rights for Garfield or Peanuts, something that already had been done. You could get that for $20, but if you had to buy something new, like that had to be created, it would be much more expensive. And then it was, I think, if I remember this correctly, and you maybe correct me, but I think it wasn't only at the end about 7 newspapers in the United States. There was a lot of legal problems too, like especially, ironically, it was the LA Times.
Oh,
had some issues with the violence in it.
Well, the Tribune media told Michael push the envelope. In other words, because the original, was sexy and violent. I mean, there were whole weeks of the two guys fist fighting, and then on the Sunday it's all covered with red and blood and everything back in the old days.
Right.
But so Michael kept pushing the envelope, and so there's this this love-hate relationship between Pat Ryan, the principal male figure, and the Dragon Lady, and they're facing off. And the way we laid it out for the week, it was a week of dailies, and it started that longer shots of them kind of going at each other. And each day you kept getting closer to them, and they kept getting closer together. And so by Friday, I had one single panel of a big open-mouth kiss, like between the two of them. And this appeared in the papers, and it became this whole, what's next in the comics? French kissing, what's next in the comics? And I said, they're not French, she's Vietnamese and he's an American, but that didn't work. So the LA Times canceled the strip, and a bunch of newspapers canceled it because of something like that. And but that was kind of cute though, because one of the LA DJs on one of the rock stations liked the strip a lot, so he was reading it like in the old days, he'd be reading and explaining each panel on the radio show. But that came to an end. Excuse me. Not because of that, but I would have kept doing it for 3 years. Even though Jean said no, she said this is it, it's over with, because there's no money in this, and there wasn't, because you just lose. It was a losing money proposition. But I figured that was a good start. I was just starting to get a handle on the medium, and I figured that another 2 years I'd kind of had it down a little bit,
Okay,
But
so
then,
sorry to interrupt. We're kind of going to move on here. I want to quickly talk about 2 newer things that you're doing. On one hand, you're doing a sort of a series, actually for quite a while, a series of commissioned artwork for a touring rock band in the United States. They're called Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Basically grew out of an 80s heavy metal band called Sabotage. And on the other hand, you started doing pinups.
right, so pinups I started in '99. I said to Jean again, I'm going to do pinups. She said, I don't know what you're talking about. Show me. So paint one. I painted one. She said, that's beautiful. And then I got my first show in Manhattan and got kind of like set up and established as a pinup artist, which created some like little stuff with certain people.
Right.
What happened to the hobbits? You know what I mean? There were people like
we don't want to see naked hobbits.
We can't. But like I never, as you can see, my whole career is always like I jump out of stuff. I don't want to stay in one thing too long. So the pinups and then TSO, those are the 2 principles. And then now with David's book, which he published, which is
Well, it's your book. I'm just publishing it.
Well, yeah, okay.
It's basically the first collection of his blackboard art. He's done like fully large acrylic paintings, and it's done a smaller series of blackboards, which explain what that is exactly.
Black illustration boards done with a series of white and gray Prismacolor pencils, and then with some paint. So it's like working in reverse. You're working white on black as opposed to black on white, and they're more rendered. And it just is a kind of a neat take. I like.
What do you see for the next few years? What do you see coming? Any more Lord of the Rings?
No, probably no Lord of the Rings. Gene's working on a book of the pinups, all my paintings, and TSO. I'm continuing to work with them. They're doing a rock opera. Well, they're recording it right now of the Russian Revolution. So rock opera of the revolution. So
in a book, what, illustrated book or comic book?
No. This will be a rock opera. My work appears on stage, in LED, on the screens, and then it's part of the show, and also for all their pretty much, but they're also doing a gutter ballet, which is more gritty opera, rock opera, and I'll be doing a
Now, just to put this in
graphic novel of that, and also there's another graphic novel we're talking about possibly.
Just to put this in perspective for you, because TSO did actually tour last year for the first time in Europe. In the United States last year, it was the 6th most highest grossing touring band. So we're talking about a major event here. This is not like a little club tour or something like that. We're talking about,
huge.
like Madison. Were they Madison Square?
Oh, yeah.
So we're talking about Madison Square Garden sold out several times in a row. I mean, that's pretty serious.
Well, they were here, 2 years ago? They did a
last
rock
year.
opera, Beethoven's Last Night.
Yeah.
And they were here,
Yeah, this
Austria,
was, yeah, it was a
Germany,
mid-sized
Swiss.
tour. They played some larger concert halls, but because it's the first tour, they had a certain amount of fans that would actually have to build that up to reach the same level as they reached in the United States. Now I'm just getting told here that they're coming back next March. So if you want to see Greg's art on stage and
So
live in action,
it's really kind of neat to be working with a rock group at 74. You know what I mean? It's like a little bit.
So I think at this point, I would like to open this up for questions. You can ask the questions in German if you wish, and I will translate them. The best case scenario, quickly get up so I can see you and hear you. We don't have any microphones, do we, for the audience? Okay, I'm getting a nod back there. No microphones for the audience, so just scream your questions out in a more or less civil fashion. Any questions? Yeah.
Did you read the books from Lord of the Rings or maybe Shannara for getting imagination what you want to draw, or was it more that you talk with some people? How did you get the ideas how to draw these pictures?
Reading the books
Really?
over and over and over and over again.
Huh?
Reading the books and marking up the pages, reading through the books, the Shannara book, and then all the Rings books, page after page, and making stickers on each page of words a possibility for an illustration.
Oh, yeah.
And then,
I think Tolkien you couldn't meet because he was dead.
Oh, he was dead by that point. Yeah, he was
But
dead.
maybe Terry Brooks, did you meet him?
No,
Not
I never met Terry Brooks either.
Yeah.
No.
Really?
No. He was when I did the Sword of Shannara book with Tim. Terry Brooks I think he was still in law school. I think he was still a student, and it was like a fan book. He wrote that as a fan, and it was a manuscript about that thick. That I recall going to Judy Lynn and Lester Del Rey's, the people I mentioned his apartment, who Lester was editing the book. Or I should say he had a stack of paper about it. I'm not kidding. It was like almost a foot thick of like scrawled notes in hand. And Lester basically took that initial manuscript and reconstructed it. And I'm there with Lester, and I'm saying, "What's this stuff?" She says, "That's my Lord of the Rings." That's the way he approached it. He was going to turn. So I never saw the original manuscript. I never read it. I mean, what we saw, what you read, just to let you know, because Judy Lynn and Lester are dead now, they really were very responsible for that first book. Extremely. I mean, they were really critical of its success.
Anyone else? Yes, back there.
I just want to say big respect for all your life work. It's really, I really have a clue what's really the scope of your art.
Thank
Did you say you have a clue or you don't have a clue?
I might have a clue. I'm on the road.
Okay, you're on your way to find out. Okay.
It takes a week.
That was just some of it that I rattled off.
Anyone else? Maybe I have a question for you to ask then. What is your favorite work that Greg did? Yeah.
Yeah, for me it was Shannara, because when I was young I read the books and your illustration at this edition was at the front of the book, and I saw it and I thought, hey, this man is very talented, is very good. And but at this time there was no internet, and then I only read the books, forget it a little bit, and when internet comes, then I was looking into internet and I found more, and also the Lord of the Rings things I didn't know before, and I never thought that I meet somebody of you in real, so it's now a perfect.
That's great.
Yeah, the circle is now perfect.
Well, I did, of course, I did with my brother. I did the Lord of the Rings first, and then well, I think it was by the second calendar that they gave us, Judy Lynn and Lester Del Rey gave us. They said, "Well, we have a book that we want you to illustrate, the Sword of Shannara."
Oh, yeah.
So they took us to their house in their apartment, and then kind of like went over the whole thing with us, what they wanted, and you know, we did it. The thing was, of course, they were painted black and white. Right, there was one color, a color cover, and then there was a center spread of the group, of the fellowship, or whatever, you know, the questing body, and that was painted in color. Then the rest of the paintings were in black and white, because they weren't sure, they didn't know what it was going to have, what sales it would have, you know, so they couldn't afford to do full color for every, you know, for all the paintings. They had a certain budget that they were working with, and but once the book came out, it was like hugely successful, as we all know, and then it was like the whole series. And,
Did maybe something just came to me? Was there ever a possibility of doing a Lord of the Rings comic book? Was it ever mentioned or brought up?
Yeah. People kept talking about that, and I kept saying yes, but you know how that goes. It never really came to.
Because there are several. I think maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I know for a fact there's a Hobbit comic book by a guy named Dave Wenzel. Which was published in German, I guess, a couple times, in English also a couple times, and there's, if I'm not really mistaken, there's a Lord of the Rings partly adapted version of the Bakshi film. So there's some half, more or less, let's call them half-assed attempts at creating a comic of the entire volume. So that would have been an interesting proposition. I mean,
what do you mean by half-assed? No, I mean, really.
Well, it's because there's nothing conclusive. Is nobody sat down and says, I'm going to make this my magnum opus, I'm going to make my life's work. And I'm going to, like the films, for example, you know, you may like the films or not, but at least they're complete. You know, it's everything. It's not like with Bakshi, where he started the film and he kind of ran out of money, and then all of a sudden it was just actors running around, and then it just stops, and you know it will never be finished.
Right.
At least the Peter Jackson movies, they are completely finished, and now they're doing the hobby. So there's like this standalone work that you know, for all eternity will be the defining film moment of Lord of the Rings, and we don't have that in a comic book.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's several people that have tried and attempted, but nobody's actually finished anything. And of course, you know, I mean, your style, and since you're interested in sequential art, basically would have been an interesting discussion at least.
But it did come up in the past.
Well, where did it come up? Like back at the time, or
shortly after, in that time frame. And in fact, the strip idea came up also, literally.
A comic strip
for newspapers. And I remember doing some sample stuff.
Now that's an interesting thing, because if you really think about it, it's kind of puzzling, you know, because the strips are so confined in terms of space restrictions.
Oh my God.
You're never going to be able to get that epic feel of Lord of the Rings in a newspaper strip. I mean, as a distribution medium, it would have been a good thing, maybe, you know, but you need like big. I mean, maybe you know this French comic Siegfried by a guy named Alice, where you see this really, it's an over-format book where you see these really big art pages with the castles and the Valkyries and everything. I mean, that's kind of like how it would have to be done.
Well, like the old days of Prince Valiant in my time.
Yeah, Prince Valiant.
Right, Hal Foster. Yeah, like that. Really, that would be the way. But I mean, it's so restrictive. When we did Terry and the Pirates, you know, for Tribune Media, they had exact parameters of how that could be laid out. That three-tiered strip on the Sundays, you know, you couldn't break it. You couldn't break out of panels. You couldn't do bigger pink. You know, it was very restricted.
Also, an interesting thing, you quickly mentioned this, and I found that an interesting question. You said you were really interested in animation early on, and you kind of wanted to work for Disney, and then Disney basically told you, yeah, you guys are going to go to school. How come you never ended up at Disney, and when you actually did go to Disney, how did that come about?
I think I went to the, like I say, the Jam Handy organization, the Jameson Handy organization, and did animation and background for. We were there for about 5 years, 6 years, Tim and me, and basically got a foundation. The whole thing. I worked with there were animators there from Disney who worked in the old golden era on Pinocchio and Fantasia and Snow White, and also from the Max Fleischer studio, who did Betty Boop and Popeye and the classic Supermans of the 40s. In fact, Wally Siegel was a guy that I worked with many times there as the directing animator. I was his assistant, and he had worked on all those old Supermans. And so I really got a great experience there. And you really, the reality of what Disney's would be like to go work for was coming through to me through these guys. That is to say, I would be another little cog in a machine over here in the corner somewhere. Because years later, I met Don Bluth and said to him, Tim and I both did, like, that was one of our regrets that we never went to Disney. He says, oh, no, you guys made the right decision. And Bluth did what? Secret of Nim and...
Yeah, maybe you want to mention Tim did the...
Oh, Tim did the poster for the Secret of Nim. And Bluth said, no, God, no, you guys made the right decision. But in any event, in 1990, they asked me to come out there to the animation department to give a talk, which I did. I was nervous as hell, even though there was none of the old guys that I had adulated all my life. There was a whole new generation there. But still, there was that mystique about Disney, you know, the Disney operation. And so I went there preparing. I'm thinking, I just can't talk bullshit. I've got to have some kind of real talk to give them, you know. So Jean's warning me. She says, don't give away your color theory. Don't give away, don't blow that. So I get there, and of course I did, because I'm thinking I gotta really, look impressive. It's about looking good, you know. You gotta look good, you know. You gotta look bright, and you gotta look like you know what the hell you're talking about, you know. So I give the whole thing the cool light, warm shadow, warm light, cool shadow.
It's giving it away right now, by the way.
And they had a black board, a green board up there for me. I'm diagramming it for them because I knew animation. I knew extreme drawing. So your first drawing in your piece of action, your last drawing in your piece of action, your breakdown drawing, and your in-betweens, between that action. And that's the way I laid out my color theory. Here's the light source, here's the shadow, here's the true color of the object in the middle, and this is how you get to the true color from your light source. You get me? It was all like mechanical, and they were all sitting there. They had a video camera on all the while like this, filming the whole thing. And all those people were jammed. They were up in the aisles. They're all the whole new younger generation. And I was floored because when I got there, they treated me like King Kong. I mean, because they'd all grown up in the Lord of the Rings calendars in the 70s and Shannara and all that stuff. So I was like, and these guys are all taking notes and everything. So then when I have a friend who worked there. Well, first of all, no. Should I tell? Well, in any event, you know, they borrowed some of my artwork to start off certain films, okay? To put it, okay? Yeah, I can't talk about that. But they utilized my whole talk for all kinds of stuff.
For their own insidious purposes.
Right. But
like that.
In any event, it was like very interesting. A lot of the key guys, Glenn Keane, and Andres Deja, two top animators at the time. They took me out to dinner and treated me like, and they knew my work, and we were all in this, mutual admiration thing, and it was great. It was fantastic. I mean, it was a terrific thing, and so that's
right. But basically, what you're saying is that. You had this dream to work for Disney, and you sort of got it out of your system. And
got it out, yes, right. At Jam Handy's, right. And if I could have gone to work, it was strange, again, synchronicity, or the way shit works in the world. It's because, at the same time that I had this opportunity to go work for Fulton J. Sheen in Manhattan to make documentary films and World Hunger, this opportunity came up through a model maker, a special effects guy at the Jam Handy organization, who's got a job to work for Disney on the World's Fair. What the hell year was that? That would be 67, 65 World's Fair in Manhattan, and he was going to build all these miniature sets, and he wanted my brother and myself to come to Disney's with him. So, we would have been like at Disney's, and I could have at that point moved into animation. But I chose this other path to go make these documentary films. And I'm glad I did. I have no regrets for it. I have no regrets for anything. But in any event, the love of animation is all still there in me. I love the art form. it's fantastic.
Okay, so does anybody have any more questions? If you do not have any more questions, I would like to conclude this Künstlergespräch mit GregHildebrandt und danke ihm, dass er zu uns nach Deutschland gekommen ist, zum allerersten Mal in seinem Leben und hoffentlich nicht zum letzten Mal, und wünsche noch einen schönen Abend.
Thank you.